Welcome to Against the Narrative. I'm Paulina.
And I'm Freddy Libertad.
And we're here to talk about Bobby Kennedy Jr.
That's right. If I had to give this a title, I might call it Bobby Kennedy Jr. doubles down on Zionist rhetoric, justifying Israel's massacre of Palestinians, while using anti-Mexican tropes that sound a lot like Trump. We're going to be listening to a couple of clips where he goes off the rails. But part of the reason I think why it's important that we listen to what Bobby Kennedy is saying on Palestine, which is really despicable, is because his opinions on other topics are often quite good, right? And I think this is what has attracted a lot of people to him and to his candidacy.
So much so that Bobby is actually steadily up in the polls in popularity. He, according to some polls, is more popular than any other third-party candidate in the history of U.S. politics, or close to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think a lot of that is because he'll talk, if you listen to enough of him, and I don't really recommend this because, his stance on Palestine is just inexcusable and reprehensible, and really exposes him for being what I would consider a liar and a fraud. And I'll just say that out loud because I think that's the truth. But the thing is that he has talked about, criticized BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, these entities that control a lot of the wealth of the United States and of the world, right? He's taken a stand on Big Pharma and how they get a pass in terms of doing whatever they want. He was critical of the vaccine mandates, and I think he earned a lot of respect from people, and a lot of people on the left, certainly a lot of liberals who are not the left, but liberals as well as, some people on the left, or a lot of people on the left, did not have a good critique of what was happening to the working class during the COVID crisis, in terms of the lockdowns, in terms of people losing their jobs, losing their businesses, and getting coerced into taking an experimental medical intervention that, I believe people when they say that they've experienced, some harm from that. Not everybody, but certainly some people have. He's also has like a track record on the environment. He's also, as part of his critique during COVID, would raise the issue of surveillance and the consolidation of corporate media and censorship. So there's like a lot of things there that he sounds really good on. And
given that the left, frankly, dropped the ball on all of the COVID issues, Bobby Kennedy Jr. found a niche, and many leftists I know, some with platforms, gave him a chance, and perhaps are still giving him a chance, although his stance on Palestine is absolutely atrocious. And today we will dive deeper into that.
Exactly. And so, again, I think that the point here is that he's betraying the virtue of truth. He talks a lot about truth. Again, if you do, I've listened to a lot of his talks, a lot of his interviews going back for a couple of years now. And truth is one of his big themes. And he has exposed himself for really being a liar and someone who's enabling genocide on the Palestinian people. So why don't we listen to our clip? This clip that we're going to listen to first. There's a lot packed in there. He's justifying a genocide, but he's doing that while he's using anti-Mexican tropes. So racism against the Palestinians, and then he's using anti-Mexican tropes in his example on why it's okay to, how the Israelis are dealing with Gaza. So I mean, let's just play it and then let's unpack it.
Absolutely. And then we'll tell you who he's talking to. I think that's important as well.
Yes.
So this is Bobby Kennedy Jr. speaking on December 6th.
But Hamas has to take the full blame for what happened in Israel. Hamas has been, the Israelis have treated Hamas and Gaza in a way no other nation in the world would treat an enemy that declared war on them 16 years ago and has dropped 30,000 missiles on Israel. What did Israel do? Instead of going into Gaza, which every other country could have done, just flattened it. If the Mexican government elected a communist, if Mexican people elected a communist government, they hijacked the government and they said, okay, we're reclaiming Texas, and then sent missiles onto San Antonio and Houston. How long would it take for Mexico to be flat? Not long. We would go, and then what if they sent 3,000 terrorists to slit people's throat, burn babies, rape women, and all that? We would go in there.
We would go in there. So that's Bobby Kennedy Jr. speaking to, I think it's Valuetainment.
Yes. The host is a fellow named Patrick Bet-David or Bet-David. I'm not sure how he pronounces his name. And he is, he's at least a conservative, if not a right winger or some sort of kind of right-leaning libertarian. The show might be airing from Texas. I'm not sure about that, or perhaps Florida. And so this audience that Bobby is playing to, and this is part of, I think this is one of the points of the video that we're doing today, is that he plays to audiences, and he might tone down his rhetoric depending on who he's talking to, or he might change it up a little bit. But I think this audience is probably open to anti-Mexican tropes the way a Trump audience would be. Trump would talk about, they don't send their good people, they send rapists and whatever, drug traffickers. And so I think Bobby knows better. And I think he knows what he's doing by using this trope of sort of the dangerous, murderous Mexican. He doesn't use the example of Canada. For example, what if Canada, decided that they were going to bomb the U.S. or something? I don't know. It's just a very strange example that he chooses. And he works into anti-communism because part of his example is that, and this is a theme, like in just sort of in his discourse in general. He's very like U.S. exceptionalist, the great U.S. pageant of democracy and freedom, and the flip side of that is always the anti-communism. So he works that in, that the people of Mexico, and it's funny because he says they elect a communist government, but then somehow the government is hijacked, even though they voted for it. But again, that's classic U.S. exceptionalism, imperialism. So it doesn't really matter if the people vote in a government that's a left-wing government. It's somehow illegitimate, okay? And then this government bombs Texas, right? And then he adds lies, the kind of like the lies that we've been hearing for the last several weeks now about burnt babies, rapes, and slitting throats, right? So again, I think it's really inflammatory to use that kind of imagery of Mexican people doing this sort of thing to good American people, right? And it's just like how the Palestinians have been dehumanized, that they're just savages. He's using this trope here. And I mean, I'm not sure, what your opinion is on this, but I just found it like, I was kind of shocked, actually, even knowing what his position is on the Palestinians and how he doesn't think much of them as a people, that he actually dug himself into a deeper cesspool.
He most certainly did. Yeah, with this one. And besides that, he also says that the US would have flattened Mexico should Mexico have had Mexico elected a communist government that attacked the US to reclaim Texas. He also, he's talking on December 6th. This is after Israel has already carried out a vicious bombing campaign and had already flattened, I believe, a good percentage of the civilian infrastructure of northern Gaza, and already was going into southern Gaza, etc. So that's that. And I completely agree with you. Now, you also flagged for us another video in which Bobby brings up the same argument, but at this time he's speaking to a liberal audience. I think I'm talking about breaking points.
Right.
Ready to go on to that?
Yeah. Well, let me just say something before we do that. He in the first clip, we started out with like some of the more inflammatory comments about Mexicans. Basically, that's the way I see it. But of course, he began by saying that Hamas has been making war on Hamas has been making war on Israel for a decade and a half. That they've been shooting, I think he says 30,000 missiles. And I guess my question is, how many people did those 30,000 missiles kill? Those 30,000 missiles, a lot of military experts consider those ineffective, inaccurate, and they'll use words like firecrackers or, they're not, it's not like what Israel did to Hamas in the last couple of months, or shouldn't even say Hamas. It's not about Hamas to the Palestinian people. So I think it's just odd that when he's doing this interview, like as you said, Israel basically already flattened. They did what he's saying that they don't do. They did it. And it's just odd that there's like a cognitive dissonance there, that he doesn't quite get that it sort of already happened and it's happening as he speaks, that they are flattening it. And of course, it's okay with him that the Palestinian people are paying this price, even if supposedly Hamas was responsible. But let's listen to the second clip, because he plays it a little bit differently. He uses the same example, but it's a little bit different, and we could unpack that as well.
All right. Here's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. speaking on breaking points with Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty.
So Israel, instead of going in and attacking, if Mexico elected a communist government and the communist government began sending shells onto civilian populations in San Antonio and Houston and say, we're going to retake Texas, which they have a legitimate claim to. We're going to retake it. How long would it take us to go in there? It wouldn't take us very long. We would go in and we would do whatever it took to take out the people who are sending the shells. And Israel, instead of doing that, Israel did something extraordinary, which is it invested in an Iron Dome, which is to defend itself again, just to live with missiles. There's thousands, tens of thousands of Israelis that have, on that part of Israel, that have been raised in bomb shelters. Who would put up with that? There's nobody in the world.
No one here is excusing the actions of Hamas, but I think you would agree that one atrocity does not justify another.
All right. Well, I
think what stands out here for me is that he doesn't talk about flattening Mexico in this clip with this audience. This audience is likely, has a considerable amount of people who would consider themselves liberals, maybe even progressive or left. And so he brings up the Mexico example, but it's not as vicious as he does with the other show, right? He doesn't talk about flattening it. He doesn't go on and talk about 3,000 Mexicans coming over and slitting people's throats and burning babies and raping women. So he actually tones it down. And I think that's what's most interesting, is that he's a typical politician. People want to think of him, those who are supporting him, as being somehow different, when in fact he is playing to audiences and is, tailoring his rhetoric to the audience. Here, if you notice, he says, when he talks about Mexico wanting to, in his theoretical example, wanting to retake Texas, he actually says, which they would have like a legitimate, I don't know what his exact words
claim, right?
Yeah, right. And so he doesn't say that on the other one. And it's very interesting that he doesn't. And it's important because this audience just might know something about the history of Texas, which is that Anglo-Texans came in when it was still a part of Mexico. Mexico had outlawed slavery, and these so-called founders of Texas, of the Texas that eventually became part of the U.S., they kept their slaves, right? So there's just a lot of history there in terms of just the example of Mexico itself being an using an anti-Mexican trope, because there's just been so much racism against Mexican people here in the United States, going back to the mid 1800s up to the present. And he should know that, and he should not be using these kind of examples. It wouldn't change the fact that, his position on the Palestinian people is despicable. But what it does is it reveals that, he can use this sort of dehumanizing language, not just about the Palestinians, but apparently about Mexicans as well. And I think this is something that people should take a look at if they really think that this guy's progressive. He likes to talk about how his family, whatever, they supported civil rights, they support Latinos, they support the Black community, and I just think that he's being very vicious with his language, and that language is translating into an actual genocide in Gaza.
Absolutely, and this is a presidential candidate for 2024. And even though many people, perhaps in the Democratic Party, think that he is not a threat, perhaps they might be mistaken because of the poll numbers, and also because of the, I would say, he has a very loyal following who are eating up every word of his. They loved it, apparently. I've seen the comments on social media where after Bobby Kennedy Jr. in the same broadcast that we have just shared with you a couple of minutes of with Sagar and Crystal, he called the Palestinians the most pampered people in the world. And so this is quite a danger, and I think we need to talk more about it now. There's more. This is not by far the first time, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. outright lies about Israel. And maybe we should just go back to a few of these instances very, very briefly.
Yeah.
To
also,
highlight it. But go ahead. Yeah.
Before we do that, I want, you brought up one of the comments, one of the many outrageous comments that he made on Breaking Points, where he talked about the Palestinians being this pampered people. Mm-hmm. I think that's very revealing, because a lot of what Bobby Jr. does is, he projects, and of course the Zionists do the same thing. If anybody's been pampered, if anyone's been allowed to get away with anything they want to get away with when it comes to taking someone else's land, taking the Palestinians' land, ghettoizing them, occupying what was supposed to be their state, apartheid in Israel, bombing Gaza. This is not, of course, this has been going on for years. It's them. So it's just odd that he does this. The other thing that, before I forget, his grandfather was an anti-Semite. And so I think, it's just very interesting that, part of what he might be doing is to redeem his family name. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you look into the history of that family, the patriarch, the grandfather, that is the father of JFK Sr. and his father, Robert Kennedy Sr., was an anti-Semite. It's documented the way he talks about the Jews and, the power that the Jews have. Israel wasn't created then either. This is going back to probably the 30s. His grandfather, for example, wanted to get involved with Hollywood, the film industry, and felt that he couldn't do that because of the Jews, right? Also, his uncle that died during World War II, Joseph Kennedy Jr., the brother of JFK, he made some questionable remarks in correspondence, in some of his correspondence when he was in Germany in the 30s, before World War II started, where he seemed to be pretty sympathetic with what was going on then. Anyway, we could do a whole video on that, but let's move to the clips that you wanted to play.
Sure. Let's share a little bit of Bobby Jr. Speaking to Jimmy Dore on the Jimmy Dore show. That was one of the first times when my jaw dropped when I heard his what I called his fervor in defending Israel. Here we go. Here's Bobby speaking to Jimmy.
Uses that money to pay bounties to Palestinians who kill Jews, not government officials, but Jewish civilians. So if you go to Israel and if you kill a Jew anywhere in the world and you're a Palestinian, the Palestinian Authority will pay you money for that.
All right.
Okay.
I wonder where he got that.
Well, yeah, right. Like, where did he get that? Is this like an AIPAC talking? I don't think AIPAC would even say that. That's what's really, he's just off the rails, right? Would AIPAC say that? I think they would be called on it immediately. Like, where are you getting that from? That's just, no, I don't know anybody that would say that. It's so untrue. Anywhere in the world, and you'll get paid. Like, who's paying the bounty? I guess the PA. Even though they're a contractor for the Israeli state and for the U.S.,
right.
This is not happening. So anyway.
Here's more.
Went to war. The Palestinians were on the side of the Ottoman Empire against the Allies. The Jews were on our side. There were more Jews in Palestine at that time than there were Palestinians. But at the end...
Yeah, all right. So what is he talking about? We got it a little bit out of context. He's talking about the times of the Ottoman Empire, Freddie?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's in that clip or I think it was on that same show that he talks about 1922, which is a bit after the First World War ended, right? And so during the First World War, the Ottoman Empire came apart. It was allied with Germany against Britain, France, the United States, and Russia until the Bolshevik Revolution and when Russia pulled out of World War I, right? So the Ottomans controlled all of that area, which is like not just present-day Palestine, but what we would consider the Levant, Iraq. And so during that war, they're part of that empire. It's not like they just, we're going to sign up again. No, they're part of, it's kind of like if a certain area in Germany, I mean, they're part of Germany, right? Prussia or whatever So it's an odd example that he's giving, but he does this a lot where like, well, they seem to be on the wrong side of things all the time. So they deserve what they get. The other thing is, which is even a bigger sort of, well, a straight up lie. Here he's fudging things, like they sort of weirdly decided to ally themselves with the Ottoman Empire when they're part of it. He also leaves out that there was an Arab rebellion, that movie, Lawrence of Arabia, right? There were actually Arab armies that allied themselves with the Allies against the Ottomans, because a lot of the people in the Ottoman Empire actually did want to be liberated, right? Whole other discussion, but he likes muddying the waters. The thing that he says, though, about there were more Jews than Palestinians, that is a straight up lie. That's not even true in 1948.
Yeah.
In 1948, I think it was like over 2/3 Palestinian, less than 1/3 Jewish. So in the time period that he's talking about, like anywhere between the end of World War I and 1922, I mean, he's lying. I think he's lying. And if he's not lying, he's so confused that this is someone that you cannot trust to offer a valid opinion on what's going on in Palestine. If he's getting his facts so wrong on something that is actually pretty straightforward, then he can't be trusted. I mean, at this point, I don't believe him when he talks about almost anything now. But let's hear, and I think there's another one or two.
Now he's going to go and talk about 1967, what happened in 1967. Right. Let me play this.
To the Palestinians in Israel, it allowed them to stay. And then, it's been attacked. It was then attacked in 1967, and in that land it was attacked, and it took land from its attackers. The Palestinians again were on the losing side, but it took strips of land from the attackers, which is the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and the Golan Heights.
All right.
Yeah, and then. Okay. So this is just really bad. It's more recent. 1967 is more recent than the end of World War I. But for someone who's supposed to know something about history, or is he just so misinformed for someone who's so educated, who has access to the best minds on any topic? He could just check with people. In 1967, Israel initiated a war against Egypt. They started it. Now, I think part of what's going on here is that I think, again, I would have to study this more deeply, but I think for years, actually, because the Israelis lie pretty much about everything. So I think there was a time period where they were actually saying, and people were believing, right, that they were invaded. That was like the propaganda, just like, in 48, there was or whatever, when they came to Palestine, it was there were no people there, or nothing was growing and they made a desert bloom or whatever. There's a whole narrative there, and part of it in 1967 is that they were invaded, and it's no, they weren't. They attacked, and then they won, and they in that clip, I think he goes on to say that Israel ended up giving back the Golan Heights, which is another it's a lie. It's the Golan Heights, Israel is still occupying them. So it's he's all over the place with his lies. I mean, I don't know. Is there another one in there?
Well, there's so much in that one that we would spend all evening going through it. You haven't flagged anything else for me in this particular clip for us to discuss. Okay. But yeah, so just going back to, go ahead.
Yeah. And the thing is that, Max Blumenthal, did go on the Jimmy Dore show to try to address some of these issues, some of what we've talked about, and then maybe not everything, and then some other things. But they had to cut their interview, that is Jimmy and Max, after just a few minutes of this stuff, because it's just so much. It's like, how many lies per minute can he tell? It's amazing. And then again, it gives you pause, like, well, how much is he lying about other things? And, maybe we could at some point do a show on his position on the border, because I don't know now whether he's just making things up on that issue as well. I'm inclined to think so, particularly given the anti-Mexican rhetoric that he's willing to utilize in dehumanizing the Palestinians.
All right. Well, we've covered quite a lot, I think, for our first episode of Against the Narrative.
Yep. And there's a lot more work to do. And so we can end it there, and we could pick it up with some more Bobby and the Bobby Jr. files. Again, I just want to say that he comes into the presidential race with a lot of legitimacy, because he has taken what a lot of us would consider, strong stands on issues that are important to us. But that doesn't excuse what he's saying about the Palestinian people. And if anything, it should tell us that he is dangerous, that whatever even when he's telling the truth, that doesn't mean he's necessarily going to follow through with things. And I want to be on the record just saying that, having followed him for quite a while now, for a couple of years, and reading about him and his family and listening to a lot of interviews, I think he really exposed himself on this issue of Palestine. And it reveals that he's an imperialist and an egomaniac, quite frankly, and genocidal. And I just think that people need to take the time to look at his stance and hopefully, share with their friends who might be thinking about voting for him or supporting him that he is a fraud.
I agree. All right, more to come. Thanks for tuning in. This is Against the Narrative with Paulina and Freddie. See you next time.